And what's happening in Surah An-Najm is we're going to see a tafsir of Wal Quran al-Majid. What makes it so majestic?
وَالنَّجْمِ إِذَا هَوَى مَا ضَلَّ صَاحِبُكُمْ وَمَا غَوَى.
Wouldn't it be nice if there was a streaming service that brought you closer to the Quran? Bayyinah TV strives to do just that, with over 2,000 hours of enlightening content centered on the Quran and Arabic. Make learning a habit. Tap now to get Bayyinah TV for yourself today.
So, before I get into the surah itself, I need to give you a couple more preliminary concepts that I need you to be aware of. You remember that Legos analogy I gave you? I'm going to give you this picture. There's no text. There's just this picture. The idea is that there are strands within a surah. Strands within a surah. So I'm going to list some strands for you. Some of the more common strands in Meccan surahs. Okay? And they all get stitched together. So one of those strands are the signs of Allah. That's one of the strands that you find a lot in Meccan surahs. So the signs of Allah could be in the mountains, the signs could be inside of ourselves, the signs could be in history, etc. Right? That's one. The second is prophetic history. Prophetic history. Okay? Now, prophetic history, I'm not talking about nations and their destruction. That's separate. Prophetic history is like, you know, when the angels came and spoke to Ibrahim alayhi salam that he's going to have a child. That's a small episode of prophetic history. Or when Musa alayhi salam spoke to Allah on the mountain, that's prophetic history, right? So that's the second strand now. A third strand is Judgment Day and the afterlife. Judgment Day and the afterlife. How many we got so far? What are they? What was number one? Signs of Allah. Two. Prophetic history. What was three? Judgment Day, right? Another strand is going to be the fall of nations. The fall of nations, like the fall of Fir'aun's nation, the fall of the nation of Ad and Thamud, and so on, right? So the fall of nations is yet another strand, right? Then another strand is comforting the Prophet. This is a very important strand that's in the Meccan Quran, comforting the Prophet. So the Prophet will be told, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, ignore what they're saying. Be patient with what they're saying. Allah is with you, etc. Right? So comforting the Prophet is a constant strand that's going on inside of these surahs. And then these are the main ones. There's some smaller ones, like for example, the basis of how do I describe this? You can call it spiritual morality. Spiritual morality. Let me explain what that means. You know how like in Islam we have technicalities like how do you make wudu, right? We have technicalities for ghusl. We have technicalities for how do you slaughter an animal. Those are very technical and specific things. But honesty, kindness, being fair to one another, being good to parents, those are not technical. That's a part of what? Spiritual morality. So the technical, the Sharia, that stuff came mostly in Medina. But when Mecca, in Mecca, when the Quran was talking about good deeds, it was basically in the realm of this spiritual morality. That's what it was talking about. How many strands do we have now? 6. Another strand, the Quran itself. Or actually, let's make it broader, revelation itself. And let me explain what this means. Revelation is 3 things. Revelation is 3 things. The angel who delivers it is part of the machinery of revelation. What is the angel delivering? The message, that's part of revelation. And who's receiving it? The messenger, that's also part of revelation. So there's 3 pieces to revelation. There's the deliverer, the angel, you can call it the message or the book, and the messenger, the recipient. All 3. That is one of the subjects, one of the strands in Meccan Quran, dealing with that in one way or the other. The reason I brought this up right now is I want you to know something about Surah An-Najm from the outside before we go inside. Surah An-Najm belongs to a group of surahs between 50 and 56. You should know that. Between what surahs? 50 and 56. These are all Meccan surahs, all of them. And they all have strands that build on each other. So Allah will give you a little bit of one of the strands in Surah Qaf, and He'll give you some extras. The same strand will come up somehow again in Surah Al-Dhariyat, then it will come again in Surah Al-Tur, and then it will come again in Najm, then in Qamar, then in Rahman, and then in Waqi'ah. 50 all the way to 56. Now I'm going to talk to you about one of those strands. One of those strands is the Quran itself. Revelation, the Quran itself, is one of the strands that you find in Surah number 50. It comes again in 51. It comes again in 52. It comes again in 53. And we're in 53 right now. So I want to show you what's happening with this strand. Why do I want to show you this strand and not the other strands? Because we're dealing with section number 1 of the surah. And section number 1 of the surah is actually about the Quran, revelation itself. So let me tell you what happens. In Surah Al-Qaf, Allah swears, Wal Quran al-Majid. He swears by the Quran full of majesty. The glorious Quran, the majestic Quran. He doesn't explain what makes it majestic. You should ponder that yourself. But he's dropped an idea in Surah Qaf that he's describing the Quran as what? Majestic. In Surah Al-Dhariyat, he says, this Quran is as true as your ability to speak. He's basically saying if you contemplate the human ability to speak, you will realize it wasn't given as a product of evolution. And you will also realize its limits. And the more you contemplate human speech, the more you will become clear that this cannot be human speech. إِنَّهُ لَحَقٌّ مِثْلَ مَا أَنَّكُمْ تَنْطِقُونَ. It's a pretty remarkable statement. So there's a proof for the Quran in my own tongue. My own tongue is proof for the Quran if I contemplate it. That's in Surah Al-Dhariyat. Surah Al-Tur now takes a few extra steps. The Surah Al-Tur now says, here are all the things they say to say this is not from Allah. All the allegations against the Quran, all collected in one place in Surah Al-Tur. وَمَا أَنْتَ بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ بِكَاهِنٍ وَلَا مَجْنُونٍ. You're not a mind reader, you're not a sorcerer, you're not insane. Are they saying he's a poet? Are they saying he's crafting it and editing it himself? تَقَوَّلَهُ. Well, you know what? If this is human speech and it's one of these categories, why don't you just bring something like it? فَلْيَأْتُوا بِحَدِيثٍ مِثْلِهِ. Then they should do it. They should produce something like it. So what you're seeing now is a progression. The proof. Surah Al-Dhariyat was proving the Quran. Surah Al-Tur is proving the Quran. But Surah Qaf was not proving the Quran. Surah Qaf was just saying it's full of majesty. It was describing the beauty of the Quran. And what's happening in Surah An-Najm is we're going to see a tafsir of Wal Quran al-Majid. What makes it so majestic? What are some things that you can think about and I can think about that make it majestic? So keeping track of these strands is helpful because Allah is building an idea and other strands will be built, but this is the first one that we're going to dive into, okay?